I moved into Summercrest Estates in late spring, the driest on record in nearly 15 years. The welcome packet said, lush lawns, quiet streets, and a tight-knit community. But what I got was yellow grass, dying hedges, and neighbors too tired to smile. The entire town was under severe drought restrictions. Sprinklers were banned. Car washing was illegal. Fines were handed out like flyers. Except, of course, on lot number 6. Deborah Mitchell's mansion sat at the corner bend of Maple Drive like a palace. Gleaming windows, sculpted hedges, a circular driveway with cobblestone. But what stood out most wasn't the architecture, it was her grass. Emerald green, perfectly trimmed, sparkling in the sunlight like a country club fairway. It didn't make sense. Everyone else's lawn looked like a wheat field after a wildfire. Mine was no better. But hers? You could lie down and roll in it like a commercial for allergy meds. I wasn't the only one who noticed. A few neighbors muttered as they walked past. Some looked away, some glared, but no one said anything. Because Deborah wasn't just a homeowner, she was the HOA president. And not just any president, she'd held the position for 11 years straight, longer than most people had lived here. She ran meetings like courtroom trials, wore sunglasses indoors, drove a matte black Range Rover. Her lawn wasn't just green, it was a statement. I am untouchable. And that bugged me. See, I used to be a civil engineer back in my former life, before I burned out, before the divorce, before the move. But old habits die hard. And when something didn't add up, especially something involving infrastructure, my brain wouldn't let it go. So I started paying attention. Each morning, I jogged past her house. Same routine, same route. I slowed down near the curb, watched for sprinkler heads. Nothing. Then one night, I stayed up late and walked my dog past 2 a.m. That's when I heard it. A hiss, quiet, constant, faint, like a whisper from underground. I followed it to the side of her property. Behind the tall hedges, just out of view, was a concealed irrigation panel. It wasn't standard HOA issue. The box was newer, stainless steel, key-locked, and worse, it wasn't drawing from the typical residential line. I traced the piping the next morning, using a telescopic sewer camera I still had from a past job. It ran beneath the street, across multiple properties, and tapped directly into an old municipal access line that was supposed to be decommissioned 5 years ago. This wasn't just a green lawn. This was a private water supply. Stolen, hidden, illegal. I couldn't believe it. She had rigged a full-scale irrigation system beneath the neighborhood, not only breaking the law but stealing city water during an active drought. While the rest of us got fined for watering potted plants, she was running a personal rainforest. It got worse. I asked around subtly at first. Neighbor after neighbor had received fines. $100 here, $250 there. One guy got $500 for a water spot on his driveway. And who issued every one of those violations? Deborah. She controlled the HOA board. 3 votes out of 5 were personal friends. The treasurer was her cousin. The secretary was her hairstylist. There were no checks and balances, only intimidation. I finally brought it up casually during a morning dog walk with a neighbor named Jorge. He used to work in landscaping and still carried the bitterness of it. Her lawn, he said, spitting on the sidewalk? It's a joke. You know she had the HOA fund her entire sprinkler rebuild last year? Called it community beautification. Meanwhile, I got fined for my brown grass twice. Had to put in rocks just to avoid the letters. I felt my blood rise. This wasn't just corruption. It was systemic. Funded by the HOA budget. Hidden from the public. And that's when I made a mistake. I sent an anonymous complaint to the city. I thought that would be enough. Let the officials handle it. I didn't want trouble, just justice. But 3 days later, I got a letter on my doorstep. HOA violation, code 7.2. Unsanctioned structural device on property. They were citing my bird bath. A bird bath. According to the citation, it was interfering with native drought recovery patterns. The fine, $150. I knew, then she knew. Somehow, she had found out I reported her. Or maybe she didn't know for sure, but she suspected. And when Deborah suspected, she didn't wait for evidence. She retaliated. The next week, the fines piled up. One for excessive mailbox wear. Another for non-uniform grass height. Then one for noise pollution. Apparently my wind chimes were too expressive. I stopped jogging past her house, started watching from my upstairs window instead. That's when I saw her, standing in the driveway, clipboard in hand, sunglasses on, staring directly at my window. She wasn't hiding anymore. This wasn't HOA enforcement. This was war. Deborah Mitchell wasn't just angry now. She was watching me. Every morning I stepped outside. I felt it. Her eyes, her clipboard, her quiet little dog that never barked, just stared. The tension on Maple Drive had thickened into something unspoken, a cold war of sideways glances and passive-aggressive citations. But I wasn't going to back down. After the bogus fines and fake complaints, I realized something. Deborah had power because no one ever pushed back. The whole community feared her. But fear only works until someone decides enough is enough. So I did what I knew how to do best. I started digging, not physically yet, but with records. I drove 40 minutes to the county utilities office, took a number, waited 2 hours. When I finally got access to Summercrest's water infrastructure records, I noticed it immediately. There were 2 active water lines feeding into the neighborhood. One of them was standard residential. The other, a legacy line, an older commercial supply system from when this land was used as a nursery farm 2 decades ago. It was never fully removed, just capped and buried. Except one branch wasn't capped. It ran directly beneath Maple Drive, right toward Deborah's house. That was the supply line she had tapped, quietly, illegally, and likely without anyone else knowing, not even the city. And guess what? That legacy line wasn't metered. That meant no tracking, no billing, no oversight. Free water. Forever. I returned home and called my old friend Marcus, an inspector I used to work with back in the city. He owed me a favor. I told him it was off the record. I can't file anything, he said, but I'll take a look. We agreed to meet in the middle of the night. He arrived in a plain work truck. No logos, no uniform, just tools, a flashlight, and an attitude. We popped a storm grate near lot number 4. Crawled in, mapped the piping. Within 30 minutes, he confirmed everything. Someone's bypassed the municipal flow. Whoever did this knew what they were doing, he muttered. This is felony-level stuff. You're looking at theft, tampering with city property, possibly even environmental violations. He looked up at me. You want me to report it? I hesitated. I still didn't have proof Deborah was directly involved. Not yet. If I pushed too soon, she'd just lawyer up. I needed more. Hard evidence. No, I said. Not yet. But Marcus had already said the magic words. Felony, environmental violation, theft. I didn't need to take her down with rumors. I was going to bury her with truth. The next week, I rented a soil moisture meter. Not the cheap ones from the hardware store. I got the industrial kind, the one landscapers use for golf courses. Then, late at night, I walked the neighborhood, checking the grass readings on each property. Normal lawns had low moisture, just as expected. But Deborah's? Her lawn was fully saturated, nearly marsh-like, as if it had been rained on every night. Impossible during a drought. Then, I checked something else, the garden boxes behind her house. There, beneath a hedge line, hidden from street view, were vegetable beds, flowers, and decorative plants all thriving. Tomatoes the size of apples, roses in full bloom. She wasn't just watering her grass. She was running a private Eden. I took photos. I recorded audio of the irrigation running past midnight. I traced the flow from the secret box I found back in part 1, now unlocked thanks to a loose screw I accidentally bumped earlier in the week. And what I found inside made my stomach twist. A full irrigation panel, set on a timer, feeding 6 different zones. Zones labeled not with numbers, but names. Front lawn, north flowers, private bed, back hedge, pool drain, and the final one, bypass. Legacy. That was it, the smoking gun. She'd labeled the illegal line herself. I printed everything, put it into a folder, and I waited. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday. Community Hall, 6 p.m. Normally no one showed up, just the board, a couple retirees, and whoever was getting fined that week. But I'd spread the word. Quietly, carefully. I knocked on doors, slipped notes into mailboxes. No drama, no accusations, just this. Come to the next HOA meeting. Ask about the water. That Thursday, the room was full. Every chair taken. People standing in the back. Even Jorge showed up, arms crossed, looking like he was ready to brawl. Deborah walked in late, of course, wearing all black, oversized sunglasses, and a smile that could kill a cactus. "Let's begin," she said. But this time, I stood up before she could finish her first sentence. "Before we begin, I have a few questions," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "This is an open forum yet." "It's not about a forum. It's about a felony." That got the room quiet. Dead quiet. I held up the folder. "And here is proof that someone has been stealing unmetered water from the city, using a legacy line that runs directly under Maple Drive. That water is being used to maintain one property and only one during an active drought." I flipped to the labeled irrigation panel photo. Dead quiet. I held up the folder. "In here is proof that someone has been stealing unmetered water from the city using a legacy line that runs directly under Maple Drive. That water is being used to maintain one property and only one during an active drought." I flipped to the labeled irrigation panel photo. "Do any of you have access to a zone labeled bypass legacy?" A few gasps, then murmurs, then silence again. Deborah didn't speak. She stared at me, calm, controlled. Then she smiled. "That's quite the accusation," she said coolly. "And I assume you've trespassed on private property to get that information?" "I never stepped foot past your hedges." "But you entered a utility box. One that's on public ground and connected to a municipal line." She leaned forward, her voice low. "You have no idea who you're messing with." And there it was. The mask slipping. The calm cracking. Her voice shook not from fear but rage. And that's when Marcus walked in. Late, but perfect. Still in his inspector gear, holding a clipboard of his own. He walked up to the board table, set it down. "I'm from the City Utilities Department," he said loud and clear. "I was called for an unofficial inspection. I've now made it official." He turned to the crowd. "There is indeed a stolen water line being used on a private property without meter or permit. Charges will be filed. Immediate investigation begins tomorrow." Gasps again. A woman dropped her purse. Jorge whispered, "Boom." But Deborah? Deborah stood up, screaming, "This is harassment. This is slander. You can't prove anything." "Oh, but I can," Marcus said, pulling a photo from his clipboard. "That irrigation panel? We traced it. It's hooked into the same system that was supposed to be shut down in 2013. You've been using unmetered water for at least 2 years." People stood, shouted. Someone called her a criminal. Someone else said they wanted every dollar of their fines refunded. And for the first time in 11 years, Deborah Mitchell, the Queen of Summercrest Estates, lost control. She slammed her clipboard on the table, screamed at the board, cursed at Marcus, then stormed out the door. But not before turning to me, face twisted in rage, and saying something I'll never forget. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." By the following morning, Deborah Mitchell's house was swarming with city workers, investigators, and at least one environmental enforcement officer. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains and porch blinds like they were watching a live crime drama. And they were, because this wasn't just an HOA dispute anymore. This was a full-blown scandal. They dug up her irrigation lines, took photos, cataloged every illegal pipe, her perfect lawn, torn up like a battlefield. The once pristine hedges now looked like ragged remains of a defeated empire. Deborah wasn't arrested, not yet, but she was slapped with a cease and desist, a pending civil lawsuit, and the threat of criminal charges. And for the first time in over a decade, the HOA board voted her out. It should have been over. But with people like Deborah, it's never over. That night, my mailbox was torn off its post. I found my car windshield smashed. A note duct taped to the hood read, "You think he won? You have no idea who she knows." I reported it to the police. They shrugged. No witnesses, no cameras. Typical. But I knew who was behind it. Deborah might have been dethroned, but she wasn't done. Because here's the thing, when you pull a weed like her out of the ground, it doesn't die quietly. It spreads, looking for new places to root. 2 days later, I got a call from Jorge. "You better come to the community hall," he said. "Something's not right." I drove down. There, taped to the front doors, was a notice of emergency HOA board session, called not by the acting president, but by a concerned coalition of homeowners. It was signed by 14 people, almost all of them the same ones who'd backed Deborah for years. Inside, they were already sitting at the board table, acting like they had never voted for her, claiming they were shocked and dismayed by her actions, and now wanted to tighten regulations to restore order. But their first new motion? retroactively raise all HOA fines. Their second, create a neighborhood oversight committee with surveillance permission on all public-facing property fronts. And guess who they nominated as chair? Deborah's best friend, Linda. They weren't cleaning house. They were rebuilding the empire under new names. Same corruption, new faces. I stood up. "This is a cover-up," I said to the room. "You're trying to protect yourselves." Linda smiled, sugar sweet. "We're trying to bring peace back, not chaos." Then she leaned forward, whispering into the mic. Besides, not everyone hated Deborah's lawn. That night, things escalated. First, Jorge's yard was egged. Then, the Simmons family who had voted against Deborah found their outdoor lights smashed and a dead lawn flamingo nailed to their fence. These weren't just random acts. This was a message. The old regime might have fallen, but the roots were still alive and angry. But here's the thing about corruption. The deeper you dig, the more rot you find. And I wasn't done digging. Back at home, I cracked open old HOA meeting minutes, most of which hadn't been touched in years. Sloppy record keeping, fuzzy accounting, but hidden between dull lines of boring motions and parking space complaints, I found it. Line item number 47, 2019. Community Grounds Restoration Initiative. $14,000 allocated. Approved by President Mitchell, Treasurer Klein, Secretary Fowler. That's a lot of money for flowers. I checked the next year, another $11,000, then $9,000 in 2021. All vague entries. No receipts. No contractor names, just approval stamps. That wasn't gardening. That was laundering. I looked deeper into city permits, vendor filings, and finally tax ID cross-matches. Turns out the contractor listed for all the restoration work didn't exist. Or rather, it did exist. But the business address? It was Deborah's sister's salon. She created a fake landscaping business, run through a family member, billed the HOA, pocketed thousands. And guess who signed every check? Her cousin, the former treasurer. It wasn't just water theft. It was full-scale embezzlement. I printed everything. And this time, I didn't go to the HOA. I went straight to the local news. They ran it under the headline, "OA from Hell, Drought Queen Caught in Lawn Watergate and $30 K Theft." It went viral in town within hours. By morning, the HOA office phone was ringing off the hook. Neighbors were storming the office demanding refunds. A petition was started to dissolve the HOA entirely. City Council called for an emergency audit. And Deborah? She finally snapped. Not in secret this time. She showed up at my door. No sunglasses, no clipboard, just rage. "You think you're a hero?" she screamed. "You think you saved anyone? You don't know how this place works." I didn't respond. I just held up my phone. Recording. She paused, realized, then spat at my feet and stormed off. But before she left, she turned one last time. This neighborhood was mine. And in that moment, I saw it not just anger, but pain. Not regret, not shame. Just the cold bitterness of someone who lost their empire. An empire built on lies, fines, and green grass. Now turned to dirt. Summercrest Estates wasn't quiet anymore. The birds had stopped chirping, the neighbors had stopped waving, the lawns were brown, the streets were angry, and the HOA board, the very institution built to keep order, had become a symbol of corruption. And everyone knew who started the fire. Her name was Deborah Mitchell. And now, the town did too. But this wasn't about just one person anymore. The local news story triggered a full-scale investigation. City auditors, legal teams, even a private forensic accountant hired by the homeowner coalition. Everyone was now digging through over 10 years of HOA records. And what they found? Let's just say the water scandal was only the surface. Turns out, the embezzled landscaping funds were just the beginning. There were also bogus maintenance contracts signed with shell companies, owned by Deborah's brother-in-law, overcharges for security patrols that never happened, kickbacks from a trash removal company, and worst of all, fake legal fees billed to homeowners who tried to fight back over the years. And guess who wrote the checks? The same inner circle, Deborah, her cousin, the treasurer, Linda, and a shadow board member named Alan Reese, who hadn't even lived in Summercrest for years, but was still listed on the HOA books. They weren't just running an HOA, they were running a cartel, a suburban crime syndicate with garden hoses instead of guns. But now, the house of cards was collapsing. The first arrest came 2 weeks after the story broke. Alan Reese picked up outside a strip mall, caught shredding documents in the back of a storage unit rented under a fake name. Inside, police found boxes of HOA financial records. He was charged with fraud, tampering with financial records, and obstruction of justice. Then came the treasurer quietly arrested at a bank while trying to move $40,000 from the HOA account into her personal retirement account. Linda fled the city, literally disappeared. She was last seen boarding a bus to Arizona under the name Clara Lopez. No one has heard from her since. And Deborah? She finally got indicted on 5 charges: theft of municipal resources, water theft, wire fraud, false HOA payments, conspiracy, money laundering, abuse of power in a fiduciary position. She turned herself in, wearing pearls, still pretending she was the victim. But while the legal system started its slow grind, the neighborhood itself began to heal in the most powerful way possible, by rising up. The homeowner petition to dissolve the HOA reached 76% signatures, well above the required 2/3 majority. A special session was called. The vote passed. The HOA was dead, gone. After 14 years of ruling with an iron clipboard, Deborah's kingdom was burned down, bulldozed, and replaced with a voluntary neighborhood association run by elected members, no fines, no forced fees, no secret meetings. The community had reclaimed itself. And as for me, I was asked to run it. I refused. Not because I didn't care, but because I knew something most didn't. When you fight evil in a system, sometimes you become the system. I wasn't going to become Deborah 2.0. Instead, I started helping neighbors with what I had learned: organizing, researching, filing requests, teaching them how to protect themselves, how to keep their freedom. And that's when an older man named Mr. Wilkins, one of the first people Deborah ever fined, walked up to me at the new community block party and said, "You're not a neighbor, son. You're a lion. And the lion doesn't live in the house. He guards it." That stuck with me. A month passed. Then 2. The grass began to grow again. Not lush, but honest. Kids rode their bikes. Neighbors talked at mailboxes again. No one feared violations for having the wrong shade of mulch. And Deborah? She took a plea deal. 6 months in county jail, 5 years probation, community service. She cried during the sentencing, claimed she was trying to keep standards, claimed she was protecting property values. But the judge didn't flinch. "You weren't protecting values," he said. "You were monetizing power. You turned community into currency." The courtroom clapped. I didn't. Not because I didn't agree, but because I knew something deeper. Deborah didn't build this system. She just used it better than anyone else. And I was about to find out how deep the rot truly went. Because 2 days later, I received a letter. No return address. Just one line inside. She was only the beginning. Check HOA registry number 84,720. I looked it up, and what I found chilled me to my core. Dozens of HOAs, all across the county, connected by one name, a property management firm called Regent Residential Services. And guess who sat on its board? Alan Reese. He wasn't just part of Summercrest. He was part of a statewide network of manipulated HOA boards, shady contracts, and small-town empires. Summercrest wasn't the only battlefield. It was just my beginning. The letter haunted me. She was only the beginning. Check HOA registry number 84,720. I thought it ended with Deborah Mitchell. I thought exposing her theft, the fake landscaping scams, and the HOA takedown was enough. But I was wrong, because what I found wasn't a trail. It was a network. That registry number led me to Regent Residential Services, a shady-sounding name for a very real property management company. The kind that advises HOA boards, processes payments, and handles vendor selection for thousands of neighborhoods. On the surface, they looked legit. But when I dug deeper, comparing public filings, matching digital fingerprints, and sifting through obscure financial databases, I saw the pattern. They weren't managing HOAs. They were controlling them. And guess who was on the board? Alan Reese, the same man arrested outside that storage unit. Deborah's silent partner. He wasn't just helping her. He was running a scheme one HOA at a time. Here's how it worked. Regent Residential advised struggling or disorganized HOAs, offering to clean up their operations. They would suggest new board members, recommended vendors, and even help redraft the bylaws. Those vendors? fake companies or kickback channels owned by shell entities tied to regions' founders. Homeowners saw rising fines, unexplained maintenance fees, and stricter rules, but couldn't trace where the money was going. Deborah wasn't some rogue queen. She was just a soldier in a much bigger army. And this wasn't happening in one state. I found links in Arizona, Nevada, Florida, even Texas. HOA forums were full of similar complaints, rising fees, corrupt boards, untraceable fines, fake landscaping bills. This wasn't a coincidence. It was the suburban empire, and no one was stopping them. But I would. I knew the system now, how it was built, how it could be abused, and, more importantly, how it could be exposed. So I did what I do best. I documented everything. Contracts, bank transfers, fake board member listings. I created a digital dossier so thorough it would make the FBI jealous. Then I contacted every local journalist I could find. Most ignored me. One replied, Nina Morales, an independent reporter who specialized in government oversight and real estate fraud. We met at a quiet diner. She listened for over 2 hours while I laid it all out, from Deborah's illegal water siphon to the shell company tied to Regent. When I finished, she leaned back, took a breath, and said, "You didn't just uncover a scandal, you uncovered a playbook." And just like that, the story exploded. Her article series was titled, "The HOA Cartel: How Suburban Neighborhoods Became Atom Machines for the Corrupt." Part 1 told my story. Part 2 exposed Regent Residential. Part 3 listed 27 connected HOAs across 6 states. By the end of the week, it had been picked up by national outlets. By the end of the month, there were investigations in 3 states. Regent Residential tried to deny everything, claimed the contracts were legal, called the accusations an online smear campaign. But then their own accountant came forward, a whistleblower. He provided emails, pay stubs, recordings. It was over. Regent Residential's offices were raided. Their executives were indicted. And Alan Reese? He turned state's witness to avoid federal charges. Sold everyone out, including Deborah. She lost her plea deal. Her sentence was increased to 2 years behind bars. Karma had a long memory. But this story wasn't just about revenge. It was about restoration. The communities that were hurt began to rebuild. Petitions were filed to dissolve or restructure their HOAs. Fines were refunded. Laws were proposed to regulate HOA power, introduce transparency, and criminalize fraudulent fines and kickbacks. People were waking up. And somehow, I became a symbol. I started getting emails, hundreds, then thousands, from homeowners, whistleblowers, victims. "Can you help us? Can you look into our HOA? We think something shady is going on." It was overwhelming, but I knew what had to happen next. So I launched a website, HOAtruth.org. Free resources, tutorials, forums. A place where people could post suspicious HOA activity anonymously. I began teaching others how to request records, file public complaints, and investigate their boards. Within 6 months, I had a team of volunteers across 20 states. We weren't just watching anymore. We were defending, one neighborhood at a time. And in the middle of all this, I got an email from a familiar name, Mr. Wilkins. He had read about the national fallout, and all he wrote was, "The lion doesn't just guard the house anymore. Now he watches the kingdom." As for Summercrest, it's thriving. No more HOA. No more threats over mailbox height or dead grass. Instead, we have neighbors planting flowers because they want to. We have kids painting murals on garage doors. And last week, someone put a flamingo in their front yard, not as rebellion, but as a joke. It made the whole block laugh. Freedom doesn't always look like fireworks. Sometimes, it looks like an ugly pink bird that no one can tell you to take down. This is the story of how a suburban war started with one dead lawn and ended with a nationwide reckoning. A battle against power, greed, and silence. And a reminder, when good people stay quiet, the weeds take over. But when good people rise up, they plant something real. And no HOA, no matter how corrupt, can stop that from growing.